What are you getting with an insurance broker versus an insurance agent? Let's welcome insurance agent for the Jake Van Sloten Farmers Insurance Agency, Jake Van Sloten.
All right, fantastic. We are live here on Smart San Diego Facebook page, and I have today with me a good buddy of mine, Jake Van Sloten is here. Jake is an agency owner with Farmers Insurance. Jake, how you doing, my friend?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Tremendous to have you here. So the reason I asked you in today is because I've been talking, especially in the financial community, but I think this applies directly to the consumer community as well. People talking about insurance brokers being better.
Sure.
I kept hearing that.
Sure.
And so I've been doing a lot of investigating, a lot of digging into why people believe that.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably some misinformation, or at least some things that aren't fully understood.
Sure.
So I said, well, you know what, I'm going to have Jake come in. He's been with Farmers for a long time. Jake with Farmers.
Jake with Farmers.
Jake with Farmers.
Not
Want to make
State
sure
Farm.
I get that.
Yeah.
So,
which I get every single day.
Do you?
Yeah.
I had a feeling. So the first thing that happened was in the financial community, I had a financial advisor tell me, we use an insurance broker, and this is why.
Sure.
We use an insurance broker because we can get these coverages and stuff like that, and we can get it so cheap.
Yeah.
It's so cheap.
Yeah.
And then I had people, other people in the financial community in the mortgage space, tell me that, well, the problem with you have to use a broker because there's certain weird policies that can only be written by brokers. So if you don't use a broker, you won't get those policies written.
Yeah.
It just won't happen. They won't have the insurance available.
Okay.
And so I thought about that, and for a second I went, okay, well, what is really going on here? So with a broker, they're sitting there and they are writing policies for other companies, basically.
Sure. Yeah, they
saying,
represent multiple companies.
Yeah, Alliance, AIG, or whoever.
Sure.
We're going to write this policy. You come to me. You need this. I'm going to go find the cheapest place to give you this policy. But I'm not actually writing a policy. I'm writing it for this company over here.
Sure.
Now, when you pay them every month, I get a little piece of that.
Yeah.
And that's my business model. Am I right?
Technically, yeah. So, well, how it works really with brokers, right, is they do represent multiple companies.
Yeah.
My whole thing with, I represent Farmers Insurance, and being a captive agent, I don't represent I don't sell multiple policies, but what I do is I really understand my policy, right? Because I don't represent 18 different companies, I can really take the time to understand my policies, and when I sit down with my clients, I can actually explain to them the language in the policies. That's very, very important. As a broker, it's kind of difficult for them to understand the language, in the policies for 18 different companies.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible. Tough. And that's where I go and I say, okay, I think if you just want the cheapest policy,
sure,
maybe that is the way to go. But it's not always going to be the case.
Not always the case.
It's not always going to be the case. And here's the thing that really is something I think people need to think about, is when you have to make a claim,
sure,
you call the guy who sold you the policy,
sure,
and he says, yeah, the number to AIG is 1-800-555-AIG1.
Absolutely.
And that's the problem for me with the whole broker idea. Say, oh, that's great. I'm slinging policies all over the place. Maybe I can find one cheaper here or there. But when it comes time for me to make a claim, guess what? You're paying for a cheap policy. So guess what that means is going to happen on the claim side? They make up that difference by having a whole system in place to deny your claims. We just had Eric Townsend on last week, an attorney who specializes in actually suing insurance companies who are not following through with their claims. And personally, I feel more comfortable being able to go, you know what, I call Jake.
Yeah, that's the big difference. That's the big difference. And I get a lot of calls, whether the client gets rear-ended, or somebody walks into their house. Imagine you walk into your house and you're ankle deep in water. What do you do? Do you want to call that 800 number, or do you want to call Jake and say, hey, Jake, I just got hit. What do I do? What's the process? If you've ever filed a claim, it is a process. It's important to make sure that expectations are set for people. This is how that process works. And I'm telling you, 90% of my clients don't call an 800 number. They call me. And I walk them through that process, whether I file the claim for them, hop on a three-way call and call our adjusters. That's a huge, huge difference. A lot of people buy on price, up front. It's the most important thing to them. But the reality is that, they really start to care about the actual company when that claim happens. Price is not so relevant at that time.
Right.
Is this company going to pay? What does my policy actually say? You know, and that's where the expertise of me selling this policy for over 10 years comes into play. You know, we can talk through that claims process before we even contact the insurance company and see if this is going to be a valid claim. You know, a lot of people will immediately call in for something, and then that goes on your record. You know, it's almost like having a speeding ticket when driving. Even if they don't pay anything out, it still shows up on your
credit
record.
report. You have an insurance
Correct.
report.
So it's better to call in so we can discuss what actually happened. And, you know, in a lot of water cases too, you know, I get somebody out there, you know, to take a look at it, give you a bid, and see if it's even, you know, something that's below your deductible, you know, or if it's going to be above your deductible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which makes a big difference. So
Yeah,
I think,
it's
you
huge.
know, not that there's anything wrong with being cost sensitive. Nothing wrong with that.
No, not
Everyone
at all.
is and everyone should be. I think the question is just what is the value of the cost?
Sure.
That's what you have to look at.
Sure.
And so it's not, you know, a lot of people will say, well, you know, it's $10 cheaper a month over here,
Yeah.
so I'm going to go there. But you don't know what you're really getting for your
Sure.
10 bucks. And you may, if you knew, you might think differently.
Yeah.
I know one of the things that you're big on is bundling
Sure.
insurances together so that you can be extremely competitive and sometimes beat prices as some of these,
Absolutely.
you know, brokerage shops and
Yeah.
these weird policies that are out there. And that's a place where people can go, oh, well, you know, I have an insurance over here, an insurance over there, here.
Yeah.
Pull it all together, and that helps make it a lot less expensive.
Absolutely. So, you know, at Farmers, we sell home, auto, life, business insurance, workers' compensation. And so, you know, when you start to, and we have discounts too, a lot of discounts for doctors, police officers, firefighters, you know, attorneys. And so when you actually...
attorneys get discounts?
Attorneys actually get discounts, believe it or not. Yeah. We want them on our side. But when you do that, you talk about bundling. If we get the right client, okay, Farmers is not going to be a fit for everybody, let's be honest. But if we get the right client, you know, that's eligible for those discounts, that's bundling their home and auto and umbrella, and really values the liability protection. Okay, it's not just price sensitive, but values and understands what their policy is actually doing for them, we can be extremely competitive.
Yeah,
You know?
and I've seen that. You know, I've been with Farmers for years, so I've seen it myself firsthand. What are some of the things that maybe people don't know, like, while I have you here? Because car insurance is one of the ones that's really, it's a big deal. Everyone has to have it.
Sure.
But like the required minimums.
Yeah, this, you know, in my personal opinion, the required minimums are a joke, you know, and I hear this.
What are they again?
15, 30, and 5, and really what that means is if you get in an at-fault accident and you injure somebody else, your insurance company is going to pay your policy limits. The state minimums are $15,000 for bodily injury to other people per person, $30,000 per occurrence, so if there's multiple people in the car, or $5,000 for property damage, right? So imagine you have those state minimums and you hit somebody, you rear end somebody, and it's a Tahoe, a new Tahoe, which now are I think like 60 grand.
They're about 60,
it's insane. But you hit that car, your insurance company, and you call your insurance company, I got full coverage, I'm okay, right? You call your insurance company's going to look at it, cut a check for 5 grand, and then you're going to be stuck with the difference. Right?
Wow.
That's a lot, you know? And those are the state minimums. And so...
What do you think the state minimum should be? I mean, what would be a reasonable amount to be, because people can, this is something that people can do on their own.
Sure.
They can say, all right, I'm not going to have this, you know, lower amount, regardless of who you're with for your insurance, but just to have yourself protected in this
Absolutely.
situation.
That'd probably be a good question for an attorney.
Yeah.
But I would say, you know, I've had, in my 10-year career having this agency, about 3 people that I know of that had 100, 300, and have actually had to come out of pocket with stuff.
Wow.
And so if I was going to recommend limits, I always recommend having an umbrella policy. So in order to have an umbrella policy, and I'll explain what it is, you have to carry minimum limits on your auto. You have to carry $250,000 per person, $500,000 per occurrence, and $100,000 for property damage. I recommend that at a very minimum, but I always like to put an umbrella on there for people. What an umbrella policy does is it adds that extra layer of liability protection over your autos, over your home, over your boat, your jet skis, whatever you have. It takes all your different types of insurance and gives you extra $1 million to $10 million of coverage on it based off of, what your assets look like. Typically, an umbrella policy for $1 million is not going to cost you very much at all. And I think what people find out when they, sit down with me and really discuss stuff is that the difference between being properly insured from a liability standpoint and the difference between those state minimums is not very much.
Yeah.
It's really not very much. And there's different
You're talking about cost-wise.
Cost-wise.
And there's ways to sort of adjust that
Absolutely.
too, right? I mean, like deductible. You could say, all right, there are
Sure.
people running around out there with $100 deductibles
Sure.
and stuff like that. It's just silly.
And I talk about that with a lot of people, right? You have a $100 deductible and a $250 comprehensive deductible, a $250 collision deductible. Now that means that, if you have a loss, you pay the $100 and then the insurance company comes in, right? Pays the rest. So if you increase those deductibles, right, then that's lessens the risk for the insurance company, because that's all we're doing is we're transferring the risk to the insurance company, right? Mm-hmm. So it lessens the risk and therefore they lower that premium. So the important thing to realize when we're looking at these things is we say, hey, do you want a $100 deductible, or, because if you get in an accident and you have to pay $1,000, that may be a bad day for you, right? Yeah. But if you got in an accident and you got sued for, $750,000, it may be a bad life.
A bad few years,
or a bad few years, right? And so really we can increase here and then increase the deductibles up, and a lot of the times it's the same as what they were paying.
Yeah, and see, that's smart. I mean, that's a smart move, because really, if you get into, let's say you have a $1,000, $1,500,
sure.
you have $2,000 deductible, you get into a situation where you would normally make a claim, but you don't because of your deductible. That's
Absolutely.
a very small amount
Absolutely.
in the big scheme of things. So I think that your risk there,
sure.
your personal risk, is very small for what your reward is, which is protection against a catastrophe.
Absolutely.
It's the whole point of insurance.
It's the whole point. And if you're filing claims, that are smaller claims, and you're in an at-fault accident, you file a claim because you have a $250 deductible and you're filing smaller claims, it's going to go on your risk, and then you're going to pay higher insurance premiums going forward.
Right.
So, but most people don't know that. It's all about making sure they're educated.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, my message is mostly today to the business community because of the fact that, I'm consistently hearing it, that,
mm-hmm.
insurance broker is cheaper, they have more options, and I'm hearing that, but I'm not seeing this come to fruition in a good way
sure.
for most people who really need their insurance, because at the end of the day, you're getting insurance in case you need it.
Yeah.
So when you do need it, you want it to work for you.
Absolutely.
And as we heard from Eric Townsend last week, a lot of times that's not the case.
Sure.
And if you're getting a cheaper insurance, I think there is probably a reason, mm-hmm. right? Because everyone's using the same actuaries, everybody's got access to the same data. I mean, if this policy is cheaper, what is it that they're not covering in that policy that's 100 pages? What is it that they're not covering that makes them feel confident enough that they can lower the price?
Absolutely.
That's the big question.
That's the big question. And that's where I always fall back on. It's great to have somebody that really understands their product so they can understand the language in it. It's like you said, it's impossible for brokers to really understand all the 100 different pages of all these companies.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it, you gotta, as a consumer, you have to be educated. You have to ask those questions, and you have to really, go with somebody that you trust.
Yeah, 100% agree. Jake, so much for coming in today.
Yeah,
Really,
absolutely.
Really appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Tremendous stuff. It's Jake with Farmers.
Farmers.
Jake with Farmers. I appreciate your time. Stick around. We got another one coming up right here on the Smarter San Diego Facebook page. And of course, I'm sure we'll have Jake back in the near future. We'll see you then.